Hello and welcome to Activating Magic. I'm Darla Ledoux. I'm here with April Pertuis, and we are going to talk magical storytelling today. So,
Uh,
welcome.
Thank you, Darla. I love that. I'm so excited to have this conversation, and thanks for having me.
Yes. So, you help mission driven leaders and entrepreneurs discover how to reach people with their story, how to
Mhm.
build connections. I know you've published several best-selling books with stories of your clients and helping people really know what to tell to connect and to move people. I heard you speak. You did a brilliant job. So I'm super compelled by your story. Tell people how you got into this.
Well, to be honest with you, if we're going to, kind of talk about the magic of things today, I feel like this work has always been inside of me. I feel truly that this was the gift that God gave me. I have been fascinated by stories, really dating back to probably the earliest I can remember is about 7 years old. I was an avid journaler when I was a young girl. I
Wow.
read a lot. I was a very much a voracious reader of fiction books, which are filled with amazing stories, not necessarily true stories, but imaginative stories. And I also have always been super curious. I think I'm just naturally bent towards wanting to hear other people's stories. I like to ask a lot of questions, and I'm not afraid to meet new people and ask those questions. I'm not afraid to ask hard questions. I'm not afraid to go deep. I'm not really interested in superficial, surface level conversation. So that's kind of just who I am and how I grew up, just exploring other people and asking a lot of questions and hearing their stories and looking for stories and reading stories and even writing some of my own stories. But the work in the world, I guess, became more official when I have a journalism background. I went to college and studied media and journalism, and that allowed me to go out into the world and make a living telling other people's stories. And I'm so grateful for that foundation and for that training. I did quickly learn that the type of journalism I was, actively pursuing was not really the type of storytelling that I wanted to do. I really wanted to focus more on positive storytelling and storytelling that was more relatable to just the human experience, not
Mm.
things that were sensational or headlines or made the 10 o'clock news and that kind of thing.
Well,
So,
can I ask a question
oh,
then?
please
Because
interject anytime.
first of all, you need to know that I really wanted to be a journalist.
Oh, yeah.
And then I was told there's no money in that. And I grew up in a small town and we were my mother was on welfare when I was a kid. And so I really wanted to make money and get
You
out of
want to
my
make
small
money.
town.
Yeah.
And so I let that deter me. And now I'm a writer and we're recording a podcast. So
Yeah.
it all works
You want,
itself
it all
out.
works out.
But I'm really curious how you navigated that. Like, how did you start to become aware of the energy of the
Hmm.
media? Because you were traveling all over and reporting and
Yeah.
on TV, and I'm sure that was a hard thing to decide to leave or to
Yes.
vocalize. Like, what was that like for you?
Yeah, that's actually a big piece of the story, my story that I often tell because it was a big deal. I mean, I just had it in my mind, especially going through school, that I am going to become a journalist. I am going to become a video journalist. I'm going to be on TV. I'm going to report the news, and it's going to be the most amazing career I've ever could dream up because I was watching Barbara Walters when I grew up, right? And I just really
Mhm.
admired her work. And, she would do these really in-depth interviews and make people cry and all the things. And I'm like, I can do that. I want to do that. But Barbara Walters already had that job, right? So where was I going to fit in? So it was a bit of an exploration in the beginning. I went out every day and did that work, and also quickly because of energy, I did not have this language when I was in my late 20s, which is about the time
Yeah.
frame that this story is taking place. But I now know that I am an empath. I feel energy very deeply, and I actually feel other people's energy like, just crazy easily,
Yeah.
right? So if you can imagine going out every day telling the stories of, The people that have just been accused to murder, the mother who just lost their child in a car wreck. I mean, these are the stories we're out telling every single day. They were not fluffy stories. They were not easy stories to tell. And on top of that, we're being tasked with telling them quickly. We're on a deadline every single day. Very early on in my career, after doing this for about 5, 6, 7 years, which actually is pretty young in that career, I started to truly suffer from anxiety. And I was coming home in the evening, felt like I had an 800-pound elephant on my chest.
Mm.
And I didn't know it, but I was just collecting all of that energy all day long. And I
Yeah.
didn't have the skills at the time to learn how to slough off that energy, how to let it go, how to build a barrier around my force field to protect my
Yes.
own heart from these stories. And so I just was collecting stories all day long, and they were swallowing me up. And I got to the point truly where I worked the evening shift at the last television station that I was at. I was at a CBS affiliate, and I worked the evening shift, so I was responsible for the midday news and then the evening news. And
Okay.
my lunch break, if you will, was really dinner. And I was going to dinner, and I was having glasses of wine.
Mm.
That's not good when you're drinking on your job, right? And
Yeah.
I'm not an alcoholic, thank goodness, but it did show, like, April, this is not normal, right? Like, you should not be doing that.
Yeah.
But it was
And
the
it makes
only
sense
way
to
that I could
numb
get
yourself.
myself to go back to finish
Mm.
the work of the evening. I needed something that was taking my edge off, which was just this anxiety. And I did somehow conjure up the courage to leave that business early, pretty early in my career. I was about 28, 29 years old. Actually, I was about 29 years old when I left. And I left the business and made a different career change. Still working in storytelling, but no longer in television news and no longer in broadcasting. And I knew when I made the change, it was one of those kind of talk. You give yourself a talk, right? You just have to say, this isn't serving me. Number one, this isn't who I am. I'm a very positive person. I mean, I like to emit joy and positivity and encouragement.
I want
And
to say you're a light beamer.
I'm a light beamer. That's right. That's right. And that is truly who I am. Again, going back to just this being that girl, writing in my journal. I mean, that girl was hopeful. That girl had faith. That girl had a belief in humanity. I knew that there were good stories out there we could be telling. And I just got to the point where, like,
Mhm.
I'm telling the wrong stories. I am being a vehicle for telling stories that are crushing our communities, right? Like, these are not stories, to be honest
Yeah.
with you, I think that should be on the
Yeah.
11 o'clock news, the 12 o'clock news, whatever it is. Like, I do not believe in that anymore. And it just really got into a conflict with my values. And I don't know how I had the courage at 28, 29 years old to just say, you know what, I'm going to figure this. I want to keep doing storytelling. I didn't have any other job offers. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I left. I literally quit my job. My husband and I moved
Wow.
across the country to the Carolinas. And I just said, I'm going to figure it out. And that was really when I made a career change into doing I did a lot for the rest of my career up until the time that I did start Light Beamers. I worked and built my own career as a video journalist and a brand storyteller, telling really good stories for companies, telling
Mm.
their success stories, their testimonials, telling stories of great transformation. Those are my favorite stories.
Mm.
That's really what I'm really good at, is telling stories of
Yeah.
positive transformation. And that's the work that I get to do today now in Light Beamers.
Hmm. I feel like I want to put a few things together. You talked about coming in for this, and I'm sure people listening resonate with that in some way. I had no clue what I came in for sure. And I just kind of did what people recommended for a very long time until I had my own kind of come to Jesus moment.
Yeah.
But yet I know at this stage, my soul came in for this.
Hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
really clear about that. I'm just curious, like, because, when I think of magic, I think of it as how you know what you know. how your soul is guided to work on behalf of higher consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I think of you being in your late 20s, looking around at this situation and going, why are we putting these things on the news and aren't there good stories to tell? And like, how did you perceive that to know this isn't worthy of me?
Well, number one, my body was screaming. My body, my anxiety, the pressure that I felt was screaming at me. And the real truth of it is, I was engaged. I was dating my husband, engaged to be married, and then got married all in this time frame. And I started thinking about long term becoming a mom, starting a family. And I thought, man, this is not what I want to be doing. I wanted to do this work. That's the thing that I want people to hear. I wanted to do the work of storytelling and going and interviewing people and get the stories out of them. I've never not wanted to do that, but I didn't want to tell the type of stories I was telling. And I just thought about, what is this going to look like in 5 years or 10 years? Do I still want to be doing this? Do I still want to be telling these stories? Do I still want to be calling the police station every day, and asking, what happened overnight? And do I still want to listen to a police scanner or a fire scanner every day? And honestly, I've caught myself saying this in the newsroom. I wish there were a house fire so we would have something to go do. I wish somebody would shoot their wife or husband so we would have a case to get on. Those words came out of my mouth. Now, that is not right. Just like it wasn't right for me to go drink have a glass of wine at dinner, while I was still working. Like, none of this made sense. And so I did not have it all figured out, but my body was screaming at me that, girlfriend, we gotta have a talk, because there's got to be a better way to do the work that you love to do, but not do it this way. And so, I do believe, I love that book, The Body Keeps Score, and I really believe our bodies will talk to us.
Yes.
This is a side note, but I think one of the reasons why I'm so in tune to my body, and I let my body dictate a lot, and it does talk to me, is I have suffered from I actually had juvenile rheumatoid arthritis as a kid. And I still have rheumatoid arthritis. I didn't grow out of it. And so I had to learn it literally from 18 months old on. So literally my whole life, my body has been speaking to me. I know when I've had the wrong things to eat. I know when I haven't had enough sleep. I know when I'm stressed, because my body actually carries inflammation and has pain, and it does talk to me. So I think, number one, I was already pretty attuned to that. And so I was good at listening to my body. And when my body spoke, I did listen, because I had learned to listen to my body for a long time. So there's a little bit of that for my background. But, for anyone listening, I think it's going to require you being more aware. I do not believe or subscribe to the philosophy that we should just coast through life on autopilot. We should be taking inventory every single day. What went well? What didn't went well? What felt good? What didn't feel good? What do I like doing? What do I not like doing? Can I see myself doing this for the next 10 years or not? We should be asking these questions, because this is going to, give you intel as to where your satisfaction level is. And I don't care if you're 18, 29, 52, or 100. We are always going to be faced with opportunities to make different decisions. The question is, will you be brave enough to make them? And somehow I was brave enough at 28 years old to make a big change.
Wow. I love that idea of taking inventory. And, I say we have to create space for magic.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes.
I wasn't taught to take inventory.
No.
I didn't see anybody speaking about whether they actually liked what they were doing or not.
Right.
Just wasn't assumed we're just going to go do this thing.
Yeah,
And
I didn't really
so,
have
good
examples of
advice.
that either. And even back in those days, a majority of my mentors at that time were men, because that's the news industry is male dominated. And so, not so much maybe anymore, but when I was in the scene, it was pretty male dominated. So I didn't even really have female women that I looked up to, that I could confide in. And so I really had to look outside of that, and I didn't have those examples either. And I just Again, I did share with you, I now know that I'm extremely intuitive. I'm an
Yeah.
empath, and I do have a really strong connection to source. I did not have that language back then, but it was speaking to me. It was
Yeah.
speaking to me, and I heard it, and I took action.
Mhm. I also heard that you wanted a different environment for raising a family. And I know you said your oldest is graduating right
Yes.
now. So
Yes.
feels like you did that.
Yes. I'm so grateful, honestly, for the career that I have been able to have since that time of making that big change. Since that day, I've gone on to continue to do storytelling. It's been truly is my life's work. I have no doubt about that. I will do this forever. And I have done it forever. I've been doing this for, 30 some odd years now. But I started doing it on my terms, and I created a life and a business that I love. And I get to do it in a way that there's space for family, there's flexibility.
Yeah.
I've owned my own business for a very long time. Even before I had Light Beamers, I owned my own company called Lone Star Productions. And so I've been on my own a long time. And I've learned to navigate being an entrepreneur and figuring all those things out. But the family piece has been important, like having the flexibility, having the freedom to create and ultimately design a life that I want to live. I was thinking about this really just the other day, because there are people, and we all have evidence and examples of this in our life, where there are people that have done a much better job than me
Mhm.
of certain things around business or managing certain things in their life. Maybe they might be further ahead in their retirement plans and all of that. Like I can sit here and measure myself against other people in any category I would want. There's people that are more healthy than I am. There are people that are more financially secure than I am. There are people more that are just smarter than I am. They get business at a level that I have never been able to navigate. Like I just don't have that kind of brain. So I can measure myself against anybody and feel inferior in a heartbeat if I allow myself to. But I always come back to, but April, would you trade any of it? Because I have created a life that has worked for me, and it's made me happy. And I've been able to do a lot of extraordinary things. And I do have a business that I love, and I have clients that I adore, and I have family I was at a senior ceremony this morning at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday, right? People that work a 9 to 5 job can't do that. I can do that. I can take off for all the things that we're having right now, for all the senior festivities as my son is about to
Yes.
graduate high school. So it's created a life that I've been able to design, but it just took a lot of intentionality.
I want to change lanes a little bit. Why light beamers?
Yes. Well, so going back to even that story I've shared about the early days of my career, that in my definition, I was not being a light beamer, right? I was not sharing stories of
Yeah.
positivity and light and hope. And even after I made that big career change when I was 28, 29 years old, and I went on to do really good work that I was super proud of and I loved doing, got to work with some cool brands, tell some amazing stories. There was a time, right before Light Beamers was really born, the idea of it, there was a time where I was kind of antsy again. And I had gotten to a point in my
Mhm.
career where I went back into that questioning mode. Is this what I want? Do I want to keep doing this work? How could it look different if I wanted to up my game a little bit? And so I just kind of got into a space where I really was asking God, like, hey, I think I'm pretty good at this thing that I do, but I also think that I have another level in me, another level of potential that I haven't tapped into it. I don't even know what it is, but I think you know. And if there is another level in me, a potential that I could go and make a bigger impact in the world, and I could do something even cooler with the work that I get to do, hey, let me know what that is.
Yeah.
Because I knew I could sense there was something there, but I didn't know what it was. I did not know. But I was again asking questions and being reflective and spending time in prayer and just asking. Not too long after that, I began to have a very powerful experience with the word light.
Mm.
And it looked and sounded like this. I would be writing in my journal. I've been a lifelong journaler, always writing in my journal. And I would just kind of start doodling the word light. My hand would just kind of write it out, write it
Mm.
out, write it out. No, well, that's weird. Okay. And then I would be reading a book. I've always been a reader. And it was like the words on the page started to blur. And then the word light would kind of jump out in 3D at me.
Mhm.
Weird, another weird thing. And I
Mhm.
was like, okay, weird. And at first, this is happening and your subconscious doesn't realize it, but then
Yes.
your subconscious knows it, but your
Mhm.
consciousness doesn't know it, right? I wasn't really realizing it at first until enough of these things started
Mhm.
happening that my consciousness caught up with my subconscious. And it was like, pay attention because something's happening here. You're
Mhm.
getting a message that you've asked for.
Yes.
And I began to even hear the word light. I literally can remember standing in my kitchen one day with my back kind of turned to the rest of the house, and I heard someone say light, and I literally thought it was someone in my house. And I turned around like, who's talking to me? There's nobody there. And it just sounds like I'm cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, but this is truly what happened. And again, my consciousness began to catch up, and I was like, okay, this is really
Mhm.
weird. And I didn't tell anybody for a minute. I mean, I didn't tell my husband.
Mhm.
I just went back into my journal. I went back into prayer, and I was like, am I getting a message? Are you like, and I've never heard the voice of God before. I mean, I'm just like a regular person, but I'm like, I think there's something happening.
Mhm.
So when I started thinking about that word light, I started remembering my ask that I had put forth, like, is there more?
Mhm.
Is there more
Yes.
potential in me? What would that look like? And I thought, well, what do you want to do? I want to tell people stories. I want to be involved in those stories. I want to help people with their story.
Um,
And I thought, what do I know about storytelling? Well, what I know to be true, which is not where I started my career, that I know that stories told in the right way, telling the right story, can be stories of positivity, hope, and light. And light to me really
mhm.
has two main definitions. It's either something that is not heavy, light,
Mhm.
easy, effervescent,
Yeah.
not heavy, and it is a light can also be a light bulb, something that illuminates the way, a flashlight, sunlight that shines in the darkness to illuminate the path forward. And I was like, yeah, that's what stories do. And now I
Mhm.
had, easily 20 years under my belt doing storytelling. And I was like, oh, absolutely. That is the definition of
Yeah.
storytelling to me. Storytelling is light. And this tagline kind of bubbled up around when we share our stories, we shine a light. And I thought, yes, that is true. I firmly believe that. I've seen that over and over in my career. When we share the right stories, we do shine a light. We shine a light for other people. We shine a light for ourselves. And so then light beamer came up. It's like, well, the people that go and share those stories become light beamers. And so that was the beginning of the beginning.
Mhm.
And here we are 9 years later.
Oh my gosh, I love it so much. I First of all, I call it magic when I forget the word you used that like that you were losing it a little bit, that this kept happening. And I in my vernacular recognition magic, it's like that word, you were recognizing
I was
something in the
recognizing it.
word.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think about, I moved to Colorado years ago. I happen to live in Colorado again, so it's like full circle. But when I started my business and I finally could work online, and I was
Uh-huh.
getting clients online and I didn't need to be physically anywhere. And I started seeing mountains, and it was like I would flip on the TV and there's mountains. And I was in the grocery store and they were selling puzzles with mountains on them. And it was like you said, like
Yeah.
everything else disappeared and that was just coming
All
at
you
me.
can see.
I'm like, and so I got out a map and circled the different mountains and did a little research. And then I went to Denver. And when people would ask me, why did you move? Did you move for a job? Did you? And,
Mhm.
it's like, oh, I saw mountains. Like,
It's
what do
like
I
those things like,
say?
how do I answer that question?
Yeah.
I knew this was a super safe place to share that story because I know your people, your audience are going to totally get it, right?
Yeah.
And I share that story now with anybody because I don't really care if they get it or not. I get it. I get
Yeah.
it. It made sense to me. It was so tangible. Just
Mm.
like for you, you're like, there's no question, that you needed to be in the mountains. I even see the painting behind
I
you, like it's
know.
a mountain range. It's beautiful. And so it has great symbolism and meaning. And yeah, the same for me with light, with the word light and of course, the light beamers now.
Yeah. Well, and I heard you speak at an event and I saw the name of your business and I was like, okay, I should listen. She must be my people.
Hmm.
So it also is a beacon, right, for
Yeah.
people who are also light workers on the planet.
Yeah, for sure.
And I remember when I first heard the phrase light worker, I was like, I don't even know what that is. I think I might be one. I don't know. So yeah, I love it. Just love it. So now you help people tell their stories, primarily business owners
Mhm.
who want to light the way.
Truly. So
Yeah.
many of us as business, this is kind of the unexpected side of business this is why I think the work is important, is because when you think about storytelling for business, a lot of people think, oh, brand storytelling and the story of the business and, your
Yeah.
marketing and your message and all that. I don't really do any of that. I'm not, all that stuff is important. I've had to learn how to do that for my business as well.
Mhm.
But I think the way more interesting story to be telling for your business is the story that's more personal. I just shared my business story with you by telling you the whole
Yeah.
impetus of light beamers. I mean, now you really know more about light beamers and what we stand
Yeah.
for and who we are and what we believe more so than um, I can help you tell your story so that you can get on stages and deliver a talk or write a book or start a podcast, which is kind of how we help people.
Yeah.
It's kind of some of the things that we
Mhm.
do, but it's so much more than that, right? It's the storytelling, yeah, that you need to be telling so you can get visible for your business, so you can attract an audience for your business, so that you can build real solid relationships between your audience and yourself so that your business can grow and all the beautiful things that we need to have happen in business. But it's so much more than that. So yeah, we can get you on a stage, we can help you launch podcasts, we can find all the stories that are going to be relevant for that. But it's really so much more about who are the people that are
Mhm.
running the business, right? So it is marrying your personal story with your business agenda. And a lot of business owners don't think about doing that. A lot of business people have been taught at business school to keep business business. And
Yeah.
today, in today's digitally driven social media world, that no longer
Mhm.
works. It is not going to work for you if you still subscribe to, I just keep it all business and I don't let anybody know my personal story.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the personal stories are hard to tell, right? Because none of us really do have it all together. We have
Yeah.
things that have been hard in our life. We have failures and mistakes and regrets and hard things, trauma. We've got a lot. And the
Mhm.
more we can tap into those stories and use them in a positive way. I'm not interested in the
Yeah.
salacious stories. I've done that. I've been
Right.
there, done that. Trust me, this is not what I'm
Oh.
talking about. I'm not trying to get you a headline or put you on the 10 o'clock news. I literally
Mhm.
know that there is a way for you to mine those stories in a way that actually produce something really good that becomes that
Wow.
light that others can receive from you. And when you turn that light on and others receive your light, you have just now magnetized an entire audience to you. And that's going to help your business grow.
Wow, it just clicked for me how beautiful your story is, that you know the difference between a headline that's, just trying to get or clickbait, right?
Yeah.
Versus
Yeah.
an authentic, light-filled story.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think people struggle with that. In my world, it's all transformational leaders, and a lot of people host retreats.
Uh-huh.
And one of the best ways to set people at ease and open up the space for vulnerability in a retreat and allow people to fully arrive and be present is to share your own story of transformation
For
in a
sure.
way that people can see themselves in it. And so it's like such an important skill. And I think I see people get concerned about,
Hmm.
am I just telling this like oh, this should be in the past. Like I've healed it. Like, let's get over it.
Let's get
Let's
over
not
it, never
talk
talk
about
about
it
it again.
anymore. And then, but yet it resonates because other
Yeah.
people haven't healed that yet, or there's something in the way you're sharing it that transmits something.
Mhm.
So, yeah, tell me, what advice would you have for people? I'm sure it's a lot, but what are the main things you see where people can kind of get stuck on sharing their story?
Number one, stop trying to be perfect because none of us want to work with or hire someone who is perfect. Even though we are all kind of experts in our field, and you need to own your expertise. I can sit here very proudly and own my expertise. I am for sure a storytelling
Mhm.
expert. I own that 100%. But I'm also someone who has had failure, who I just sat there and said, I'm not the smartest cookie in the box. I'm not the most, I'm not the richest person in the world. I'm not any of these things, right? And it's very easy for me to fall prey to imposter syndrome on any number of those things. So I think the more real that you can be with your audience, the more honest, the more raw, the more vulnerable. These are words that nobody wants to hear, that me tell you this advice, but
Yeah.
it is the thing. It is the thing that is going to truly knock down
Mhm.
barriers that you are the one putting them up. There's a barrier between you and your audience when you just show up as the person that's the guru, the Lamborghini
Mhm.
guy, the millions in the bank person, the I got it all figured out. I am the expert. I've been doing this for 30 years. You should trust me. But if you let that
Right.
barrier down, and you can still say all those things, I've got all that, but let me really tell you what it's taken for me to get here. Let me tell you some of the things that I've struggled with. Let me tell you how I had to make important decisions in my life. I've shared with you guys a couple of like really defining moments in my
Yeah.
life where I did not have the answers and I had to go to my source to get it, right? I had to
Yeah.
ask, I had to receive help. I had to make big changes that were hard to make. Didn't just work out the next day, like things were
Right.
hard, but I followed my heart, I followed what I felt like was this is, in your world, the magic, right? Like I
Yeah.
followed this inner knowing that I had something to share, that I could teach people
Mhm.
some things, but I also could connect with them at a level that people weren't used to connecting with. One of
Mhm.
my favorite executive producers that I got to work with back in the day, he hired me and he kept me busy and gave me so much work, and I'm so grateful to him. But he said, April, he said, one of the reasons why I love, and again, probably wasn't the only person he could have hired. There's a lot of us out there that were looking for those types of jobs back then. This was a season in my life where I was doing some work on HGTV and DIY Network and Food
Mhm.
Network, and I was getting hired to go and do these shows. And so it was a big deal, right? It's a big deal to be
Yeah.
on TV for Food Network or whatever. And so,
Yeah.
like, I mean, get in line. There were plenty of people he could have hired. And was I the most talented person that could do that? No, forget it. Absolutely not.
Hmm.
But he said, well, the reason why I love working with you so much, because you walk into a room and you put everybody at ease. And that's because there's the camera guy, there's the audio guy, there's the grip, there's the makeup artist, there's the caterer. I mean, on set, you get all these other people that are not in the limelight. They're
Mhm.
not there with the microphone and the camera in their face, right? Probably not even ones getting paid the most money. In that industry, there were a lot of divas and prima donnas and, egos and all of that. And I just never, I'm not gonna say never, but I mean, I tried not to lead with my ego, and I just saw
Mhm.
those people as people, and I got curious. I wanted to know about them. I would go in and
Right.
their story, that's just who I am. And so I had a way of diffusing people, and I think that's been one of my secret
Mhm.
things that I've brought to the work that I do is I do get to people's story pretty quickly.
Well, and I
Um,
think that, as people are thinking about telling their story, the story can diffuse people.
okay, so yes, that's the whole
Yeah.
point, right? Like bringing those walls down.
Yes.
Like that's what you want to do. I was just at a retreat this past weekend. Actually, it was a retreat from our church. They do a family
Mhm.
retreat every year, so our family goes
Oh,
because it's
nice.
like really, it's just like rest and relaxation. It's amazing. But they bring in a guest speaker, And in this case, it was a pastor at a different church in a different town, different part of Texas. And so I didn't know, none of us knew him. And he's every bit of probably 60 years old plus, right? He's lived some life.
Mm.
And one of the things he did, and so here's this guy that's had his church. He's been a pastor of this particular church for over 20 years, which is it's a significant time frame
Mm.
to pastor, senior pastor of a particular church. And so, here he is, the expert in his field, right? And he walks up there, and not the first thing he told us, but it came out pretty quickly. The story of him, he shared with us that at 16 years old, when he was 16 years old, he got another girl pregnant and
Mm.
paid to have her abortion. And
Mm.
it has been something that has followed him his whole life. If you can imagine being a pastor
Mm.
and being in the faith
Yeah.
community, and abortion's a hot topic, right? And that could have been the thing that he could have just swallowed him up whole. He'd shove that story in a closet, never tell anybody again, and still go on and become a pastor. He could have easily done that. And he certainly, 50 years later, does not have to keep telling that story.
Mm.
But he told that story to us. And I'm telling you, it diffused the entire room.
Mm.
Because in any situation, you've got people in the room that
Yeah.
have maybe had the abortion, or maybe they
Mhm.
paid to have the abortion, or maybe I was the girl that drove my friend to have an abortion.
Yeah.
I've done that, right? These are tough
Mm.
things. That's a vulnerable story. That is
Yeah.
hard. But you know what? Walls came down.
So, April, when you work with your people and they're sharing story, how do you know which one to choose? How do you help them? Because I mean, I think I've watched so many people, we do visualizations and meditations to, allow source to bring the story in. And yet, I watch people struggle to choose. I've struggled to choose myself.
Mhm.
How does it work for you? How is your magic
Mhm.
working on behalf of your clients to help them craft their story or stories?
Yeah, stories, plural, for sure.
Mhm.
Um, we have a lot of stories that we can share.
Yeah.
And it's going to depend on this one thing. And I always say the number one rule of storytelling is to first know who your audience is. When you
Mm.
know who you're speaking to, it will be so much easier to reverse engineer and figure out the story that's relevant for them to hear it. Because storytelling really isn't about the storyteller. It's not about me. If I can share my story today, I'm not going to think it's about me. I'm picking that story because I know I can use it in a positive, powerful way to reach the audience, to reach the
Yeah.
listener, right? To prove my point, to help illustrate what I'm trying to teach, right? So that's how you have to first start, is knowing who are you talking to, and what's the goal, right? What's the goal of that particular message or conversation or talk or podcast or whatever. So when you first know who the audience is, and then you know what the goal is, then you can start filing away into your story bank, which is, something we can definitely help you have, like understand like what
Mm.
are your bank of stories. And then you pick the right story to share. Any one of these stories that I have dropped today, I've told a few times, like this is not the first time
Mhm.
I've told it. I understand that I have them on the ready, that I can
Yeah.
use they're at my disposal. I've already done the work of excavating those stories and having them in my little story
Yeah.
bank over here, that I can just,
Yeah.
this is a good time to share that story, because that story is going to help this audience pick up on what I'm really trying to say.
Mm.
So I'm using the story, which is not even about me anymore, and
Mhm.
I'm using it to help the audience.
Amazing. So you're definitely coming from stories versus
Plural.
like, oh, we have this one story that we always tell
That's
every
going to go back
time.
to the business owner who tells the brand story over and over and over again, and it's
Yeah.
really boring. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think there's so much more depth that you could get into. There's so many more opportunities to connect with your audience more when
Mhm.
you start digging into the stories that are going to be more real and honest, and they don't all have to be vulnerable and like soul crushing hard to tell. I mean, we can tell stories of joy and
Yeah.
exuberation and laughter and fun, like we all are attracted
Mhm.
to different emotion. And so I'm not at all suggesting you got to tell the deep, dark, got my girlfriend pregnant at 16 and paid for her abortion story. However, those stories, when you can figure out how to use it in the right way, that's a negative story that has a huge positive impact, right? When told the right way, for the right reason, for the right audience at the right time. Right. And so it's really learning that, and that takes some time and takes some practice.
Yeah.
Storytelling is a skill. It's something that anyone can do. I was not born with this. I was born with the gift of desire. I love
Curiosity.
stories,
Yeah.
curiosity, yes. But I wasn't born with the skill. I had to go to school and learn how to do this stuff. So I love being able to teach it to other people because I know it's something that all of us can access.
Hmm. What do you think, is in people's blind spot around story?
Fear of judgment.
Mm.
Yeah. Usually they're judging themselves or they're worried what other people are going to think. Fear of also like a lack of worthiness. Like nobody would want to hear what I have to say. My story's boring.
Mm.
That, or the polar opposite of like, oh my gosh, I've got that giant story. And if I told that, then they're really going to know who I am. And forget that. I am burying that bad boy down into the corner and we're closing the lid and we're not ever going to talk about it
Mm.
again. Because then they're really going to know who I am. And there's a worthiness issue there too. Then I won't be liked. I
Yeah.
won't be loved. They won't accept me.
Mm.
I'm not worthy. So that's the root of all of
So
it.
both sides
Both
is
sides, no
not
matter
worthy.
where you're coming from, you
It's
really
too
got to
boring.
do the
It's too dramatic.
self-worth. It's
Yeah.
work. And a lot of times I'll sit with my clients and we'll go through these deep story sessions. And I've been told that if I've been told this once, I've been told this a million times. Because again, I'm a journalist at heart.
Yeah.
That is my training. That is my background. I'm a storyteller. I'm not certified in anything else. But people
Mm.
tell me all the time, April, this is like a therapy session. And I'm like, well, I'm not your therapist. I
Yeah.
am not your therapist, but I do get where that comes from. I get it because we've done
Yeah.
some work to dig into these stories, to bring them into the light, which is where I think they belong.
Mm.
I have a podcast, which you have been a guest on, the
Mhm.
Inside Story podcast. And I started that podcast 4 years ago, not that long ago.
Mm.
And the reason why I started that podcast, I mean, a good business owner would tell you, well, it was good for marketing and it was really smart
Right.
because I could expand my audience and I could do all the things that podcasts can do. And it's a storyteller's platform, so it makes sense. The real reason why I started my podcast was I needed to give myself a new sandbox in which to explore some stories that I wasn't telling. And I
Mm.
wanted to challenge myself to go deeper and get more vulnerable and share stories that were going to be hard to tell.
Mm.
And sometimes just getting behind a microphone and not having eyeballs staring back at you, you can pretend like no one's listening. And in the early days of my podcast, nobody was listening, you know? So I really did just like, I'm going to do this. I'm
Yeah.
going to continue to work on my craft. I'm going to continue to dig to find the stories that are hidden in my dark closet that need to be brought into the light.
Wow. Yeah. Another meaning of light beamer, right? Is like to shine light in the shadow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Lots
It's
of
just
fun.
so important, and I think when we can do that and take it out of shame, it really shifts everything, right? It really does create a ripple effect of light on the planet when one person looks in their shadow.
And there's a lot of people running around with and I have my own dose of it. I have things that I'm still working on, releasing shame around, releasing guilt
Yeah.
around, all of that. And so there's a lot of people running around with that. But the reason why I go on my own personal development journey to try to do that work, to release the shame that I'm carrying or the guilt or the regret, whatever it may be, is because how is that serving me? Like I do feel called
Yeah.
to go and share stories of positivity, hope, and light. I mean, I feel called to that. And if I'm dragging around a suitcase of shame and regret and,
Right.
and all of that, it's going to hold me back and does hold
Yeah.
me back. I have,
Yeah.
I can see like, oh, April, we got to work on this because you're playing small. You're not doing the things because you're feeling whatever, the things that I'm feeling. I'm not good enough, or I'm going to make that mistake again.
Mhm.
I'm feeling those things. And so, okay, thank you
Yeah.
for allowing me to see that so that I can go do some more work, because it's keeping me from really doing the good work that I'm called to do in
Mhm.
this world. And all of us are called to do good work, not just me, not just
Yeah.
Darla, right? Like, we all have our purpose. We all have that
Yes.
thing that has been hand printed on us at birth. And we could talk a whole episode about that, but like, we all have a thing. We all have a thing that and it doesn't mean it has to be a business where it could be like, it might be volunteering in your community, or sitting with a loved one, or having a conversation, just being that person that is that person that does that. But if you're dragging around a bunch of shame and guilt, and you're not digging into that story, and you're
Mhm.
not releasing that story, it's going to hold you back from doing that work.
Beautiful. Tell us about the free guide you have. Your story is your secret weapon in business.
Yes. Well, this is a thing that, when I first started Light Beamers, it was like, okay, how am I going to do this in a way that others can figure out how to tell their story without me coming and doing it for them, which is kind of the career I'd
Yeah.
had. I'll come interview you, I'll package it up, I'll do it all for you, and here you go. So I really went through my just the questions that I ask over and over and over again,
Mhm.
that allow me, when I am doing an interview with someone, that when I get to these three things, I answer these three main
Mhm.
questions, I have the story. Okay, I'm done. We're complete.
Mhm.
I got what I need. So I basically put that into a story formula, a guide that covers
Mhm.
what I call the story arc. It goes through the three key pieces of your story that you want to look for, that you want to excavate yourself. Because, telling one story is not the easiest thing to do. Finding which pieces of the story to share. How many details do I share?
Yeah.
How do I know when I'm telling too many details? What's the format? Where do I start? Where do I end? All of that. And a lot of people make the mistake of telling stories in chronological order. And that is
Mm.
it's not the most compelling way to tell a story. It's not going to engage your audience.
Mhm.
It's going to be quite boring. You're going to tell a lot of
Mhm.
details that nobody cares about. So it's kind of
Mhm.
like the polar opposite of what you don't want to do. You don't want to tell your story in
Mhm.
chronological order. So the story arc
Yeah.
is a framework, from a journalist that has literally interviewed more than 10,000 people in my career. This is what I use. If I were to come to your house and
Mhm.
interview you today, I would be looking for this story arc. And so I give that to you in that free guide so that you can start the journey of beginning to find your story.
Mhm. Love it. I just downloaded it.
Yay, good.
Lightbeamers.com/formula. And we will put the link in the show notes as well.
Thank you. Thank you so
I love
much.
it. April,
Yeah, and when they download it, that is kind of an invitation into Lightbeamer's world.
yeah.
So you are, if you download it, you're gonna get me. I'm a I'm a high communicator. I do send
Mhm.
emails. I have a lot more where that came from. I have a free community that you'll be
Mhm.
invited to join immediately, where we do practice
Mhm.
storytelling on a regular basis. I continue to give you free resources. So come into that world.
Such an important skill, in the context of retreat.
Mhm.
I'd say there's probably 12 at least opportunities in a 3-day retreat to tell a compelling story that helps
Yeah.
people let their guard down, hear what you're teaching, frame it up for themselves, and not forget it.
Yeah.
So it's like you got to develop the skill.
Yeah, it's pretty important. It's important for ourselves, right? That goes back to our
Yeah.
self-worth and validating our own stories. But it is really important, even if you're not an entrepreneur, business owner, it's a connection piece. It's again letting that guard
Yeah.
down so that others, it's how we build community. It's how we meet new friends and build connections with people. It's how we can serve at our highest level. So it applies to business, yes, but it applies across the board to
Mhm.
many areas of our life.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for saying yes to this
Thank
invitation
you
and
for
sharing your
having
brilliance.
me. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Fun to be on this reinvented show of yours. I love it.
Yes. And y'all go follow April's podcast as well and grab that free gift. And we'll see you in the next episode.